Lesson 3, collaboration drives engagement. What does collaboration mean to you? One of the attributes of an orchestrator is to activate change through collaboration. And the key value that we bring in this area is being focused on outcomes and the outcomes that matter, to work with people, groups, and teams across regions and across the globe to drive impact that matters most to the business strategy. We often talk about collaboration as a critical ingredient to our success as orchestrators, but what does it really mean? That's what we're going to explore here in this lesson. So what is collaboration? How would you answer that? Let's slow down here for a second and ask each other, what is collaboration? What is it? We use it all the time as a word. We say we collaborated with that person. We collaborated with that team. Let's get together and collaborate. Or thank you so much for the collaboration. Or we talk in terms of it as a role. I'm a collaborator. You're a collaborator. You're a collaborative person. Maybe at the end of year review, collaborates well with others. But what is it? What is collaboration? Is it a skill? Is it a trait? Is it a method, a procedure, a process? Is it your identity? How do you define it? And let me ask you this question. Do you think everybody defines it the same way? What if somebody views collaboration as a technology platform and they think collaboration means technology, and you mean something like co-creating with a diverse group of people that have a lot of different perspectives? How radically opposite is that? And what do you do about it? That's what we're going to explore here in this lesson. Collaboration is all about helping people see and solve problems and challenges with others to achieve impact. It's about helping people see, groups of people seeing the same thing, reaching a shared understanding, and choosing to solve and work together and co-create together to make the same impact. When groups of people come together, do they naturally collaborate? What's the difference between collaboration and coordinating activities? What's the value of collaboration? Let's start with a quick video that I put together on why collaboration matters to you as an orchestrator.
The impact of strategic changes at speed requires the business to transform and perform at the same time. That means people working together across regions, to collaborate across functions, and to innovate and optimize all at the same time. To get there, leaders need both to innovate. But how well does a company turn ideas into results? According to research by Accenture, with 1,500 C-level executives, 75% said different business functions are actually competing against each other instead of collaborating on transformation efforts. Think about that. Competing within instead of competing in the market. Not only is that tiring, but also sounds like poor management. There is no lack of desire. People want to work together, and they want to do a good job. But according to the Project Management Institute, 75% of projects fail. They don't fail because of a lack of resources or poor executive alignment. And they don't fail because of low investments or staffing challenges. In reality, 60% of projects fail because of a breakdown in communication between and among team members. How can this be when a company's strategy is so well defined? We believe it's because of the whirlwind that exists in most companies today. This whirlwind is full of reactive and short-term projects and often conflicting priorities. It's that new normal everyone talks about. This new normal whirlwind creates an endless stream of incoming information and change where everything seems urgent. And that's how the important, strategic, and future-oriented ideas get left behind to only be forgotten due to a lack of commitment.
All right. So let's break down collaboration. The more I explored collaboration, the more I learn about it. I've discovered that there are many types of collaboration as I've worked across the commercial ecosystem in the client companies that I have and as a practitioner. Everybody seemed to have the same language, but they didn't necessarily have the same perspective. They also, in their various perspectives, had different ways in which they would show up. And the key is, how do you harness that? Everybody has a different experience. Everybody has their own unique background. Everybody has their own priorities. So what does it mean to collaborate? Well, we might need to get together to think about what to even look at. Some may call it brainstorming. Others may think of it as strategy, but there's collaboration that happens around looking for new insights or trying to figure out how to create a forward lean or how to project 2 to 3 years down in the future. People collaborate on that. Have you ever been in multiple discussions about where the company is going or what the business strategy is and what to do next year? Those discussions were around catalyzing change, catalyzing action, catalyzing the strategy, making things happen, getting to where the company needs you to be. It's forward looking. And there's a type of collaboration there. Once that's understood, there's another type of collaboration that has to do with trying to figure things out. And figuring things out is critical. As you're trying to figure things out, there needs to be some structure. What are all the moving parts? What's the scope? How do we determine what to do and why we're doing it? What are we actually trying to figure out? If we're trying to move to the future state, what exactly are we talking about? Are we talking about processes, people? Are we talking about roles? Are we talking about new products? What are we talking about? How do we figure that out? If we're looking to move forward when we catalyze and we're trying to figure out what we're even talking about, we've got to architect. In this way, there's a whole discussion around why we're doing what we're doing and collaborating around why we're doing what we're doing. And then there's a whole discussion around what we're doing and what do we need to be doing. And oftentimes that's requires collaboration. Then there's understanding what to do and how to translate that into action. How do you take action around what's decided? How do people align? How do they make choices and prioritize? There's a whole series of conversations and collaboration required to figure out how to make something work, especially in your environment, given the time constraints, given the challenges, given the prioritization. If we know what to do, then how do we figure out when to do it and what it looks like? And then based on that, it's how do we enroll other people? How do we enroll other groups, other functions, other teams? How do we deconflict what we're doing with others? How do we add to other people's initiatives? How do we determine how to share it and communicate it with others? How do we position it? How do we enroll others to see what we're trying to do? And just sharing something, it requires collaboration. And then there's this idea of convincing others or influencing others to take action on our ideas. There's oftentimes a whole series of collaborative steps to do that. There's a lot of back and forth and trade-offs and what's in it for me. Those discussions to activate others and convince others and influence other people's decisions to adopt your technology, to adopt your process, to deploy what you want to deploy, to prioritize your events over others, to develop products and services that salespeople need and want. There's a lot to figure out there. And activating people to work together is a whole series of collaborative steps. So collaboration happens when we produce something. We've got to figure out what to produce, structure what we need to produce it and make it work, help other people relate to it, and then sell them on the idea to adopt it over the long term. The challenge is to produce something, those collaborative steps are in a different order. We often come at it from, here's what you need to do. And because you need to do it, how does it relate to you? And you figure it out, and why, and what is important and why. We often prioritize down, but we need to collaborate up. And this can be a source of friction. So when you think about this, there's two axes where collaboration comes into play. One is, do we all see the same thing? Do we agree on what we're seeing? Now, this might sound a little cliche or tongue-in-cheek or simple, but I guarantee you, if you take 5 people and ask them what they're seeing, they're going to have different opinions, different perspectives. In fact, we want to encourage that. But now what? How do we bring that together and figure out a path to take and how to solve that, any challenge, and how to work together? This balancing act between seeing and solving becomes the challenge that collaboration can help with. Seeing involves looking for insights and trying to figure out what to architect. Collaboration helps people see and solve. So what if collaboration meant that, and you explored that idea in your environment? What would happen? Creation is powered by collaboration, and teams collaborate on each of these paths. Collaboration happens here when we catalyze, when we architect, when we try to make ideas work, when we relate to others. Each of these are collaborative efforts. If we think about it, though, we're often biased to take action. We want to do, and that becomes difficult to figure out why we're doing it in the first place. That bias of just jumping to activate, do is part of the challenge of orchestrating. How do we help people be more intentional about what we're doing and why we're doing it? How do we take the time to figure stuff out and be purposeful and disciplined and take an approach that really pays off for the long term, as opposed to putting a Band-Aid on something? This is the leadership challenge of being an orchestrator in today's business environment. You have to have discipline to recognize which path you're on and then, quote unquote, collaborate on that path. And most people won't see it that way. They'll jump to their biased view. They have a bias for process. They have a bias for spreadsheets and analysis. They have a bias to technology. They have a bias to the easiest way forward. What's easy for them, not what's best for customers and salespeople. They're biased to what's easy for them. So how do you tackle these things? Individual commitment to a group effort. That's what makes a team work, a company work, a society work, and a civilization work. Vince Lombardi. Teams are the area, the place, the fertile soil, if you will, of today's work. Teams come together around a shared vision, shared purpose, and they come together to create things. Teams can come and go. It's interesting. Most people work in a variety of different teams, but when you ask them what team they're on, they're going to say their direct report manager. What if their direct report manager relationship is only specific to one area, but yet you're asked to work in 5 or 6 other areas to have a project come to an outcome? For example, let's say I'm in enablement and I'm building training, and I'm building training for existing salespeople, and I'm developing training for prospecting. My first line manager is going to ask me, is that training done? How's the training going? When will it be ready to launch? But I might be on another team that's working on onboarding. And onboarding has many different modules. And in those modules, there are a lot of different modules related to getting in front of clients, of which prospecting is only one little thing. So I might have a broader purview on the onboarding program than what my direct manager even sees. So I might be on 2 to 3 or 4 different teams, and my manager might not actually know what I'm doing. It's hard to explain everything that's going on in each team. So I tend to view teams not only as your direct line manager, but all the other places in where you are adding value. In today's business, we need different types of skills and different types of people to help on a lot of different projects. And the key here is most of the time, as you're an orchestrator, you're working with people who do not report into you. They don't have the reporting line. So how do you work together in that? And that's why collaboration is so important. When you're working together on these paths, I put together some memory aids here, some ways in which people might show up. The activator might show up as, hey, I need to explain the words. I have a vision. I gotta put this out there. I want to sell this. Who is going to hear this? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we talk to about this? Who do we need approvals from? And the activator is very focused on who. The relator is focused on, when are we going to do this? What's the impact to the people that we're talking to? When did we need that? When he said that, he meant, when he was talking, he really meant it this way. When she does that, she means, and when are we going to get the solution done? The solution is really important to the relator because it's, what are we going to give? What are we going to give, and when are we going to give it? The activator says, who is it going to impact, and what are they thinking? And these are different collaborative lenses. The catalyst is focused on the goal, and they always bring the goal up. What's the outcome? What's the goal? How are we going to get there? How do we measure that? How do we get to the outcome? How do we take the right steps? This is not about analysis of individual piece parts. This is about synthesis and bring it together. How do we add to this? And they're focused on getting to the right answer. Somebody's detangling if they're focused on, how is this going to work? There's so many other things that people could be doing. How do we get people to make the choice to use ours? They get tangled up in that. They get tangled with making choices to actually engage. They don't see how this is going to work. They don't see how it's going to impact them. They get knots. They freeze because this is a new thing. And I'm worried about that. So somebody shows up that way, and they want procedures. And then there's the other person that shows up is the architect. That person shows up and they want to understand all of the components, all the moving parts, and they want to know what we're doing. What are we doing? What about the group? What are the moving parts? What about marketing? What about sales? What about the impact to the customer? Did we think about this? How does this all fit together? What problems do we need to solve? So these are different lenses that people can show up with based on their past experience. Somebody can show up hyper focused on outcomes, and they want to know, how are we going to measure that? Another person can be focused on solutions. What's the answer? What's the answer? What's the answer? When are we going to get the answer done? Other people, like catalysts here, what's the big idea? What's in it for people? Are we doing the right things? The detangler lens is, what's the method? What's the process? What's the procedure? How is this going to get done? How are we going to do that? And then the architect is, what are we actually doing? Are we solving a problem? Is it a root cause problem? Is it a symptom? What are we working on? How do we know it's right? So these are ways in which people can show up, and each of these map to those different collaboration layers. So what if we thought about collaboration that way? Not only is it a focus and a way to help others see and solve, but it was a way to bring together people who have different perspectives and harness those perspectives to create something better. What if we could do that? What would that look like? The architect comes together and says, what are the parts? The detangler says, well, how is this going to work? The relator says, when are people impacted? The activator says, how do we position this? How do we sell this? And the catalyst is like, why are we doing this? How would it look if everybody worked together? And I think this is the challenge with collaboration in many organizations. How do we make sure that people are indeed relating to each other? How do we make sure that it's clear what we're trying to achieve and get all this to work together? And getting all that to work together is easier said than done. People have all their different perspectives. So when we're working in this synthesis way, maybe it's all about ideas. Do you have a process to identify and vet ideas? What would that look like? What's the process? And then from there, what if you take that idea and turn it into something that's usable? You know, there's an artist may have a huge idea to build a granite sculpture, but that idea has to become something that is tangible. So what does that artist do? She goes to a rock quarry and gets a big, huge rock to shape. And she shapes that big, huge rock into something that she can use and get started with. And that's a lot of what the structuring layer is of collaboration. And then from there, she'll take something that's that big rock and she'll chip it down to something that's more usable, more portable, something that allows her to start shaping out the statue. Maybe even she can hold on to it. So the big rock becomes something that's scoped well enough to actually engage around and trying to figure out how to do that. And then from there, she takes that rock and turns it into a rough shape. You can see the sculpture starting to emerge. So she can hold it up and she could show it to other people. She could say, hey, this is what I'm building. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's my vision for what it's going to look like. And then from there, can build a polished statue. And that polished statue becomes the actual focus of what the value is. It's what people want to buy. So that's an example of collaborating. And in today's world, you're doing this with groups of people. So when you're doing it with groups of people, some are going to show up and they just want to know what the polished statue looks like. Others are going to want to focus on what's the idea. These three here in the middle of how do we figure out how to make the right type of statue, if you will. These are all collaborative challenges. It's really easy to expect a highly polished output and want the slides to look nice. And it's really easy to say, hey, let's brainstorm on that. The challenge is, are we doing the right things? And then when we bring in people who have different perspectives, some are biased to who, and some are biased to when and how and what and why, what's the process to actually collaborate? And, you know, some tips here are, it's focusing on what's the value. What is the valuable thing we're building? We're not just collaborating to say we collaborated. To do that, how do we keep it simple? How do we focus on 80-20? What's the right 20% that'll move the needle? If we think about it also, are we in touch with these lenses that people have? Do we understand that there's all these variables? Are we developing a process that takes ideas and converts them into something that's polished? Is there a process for that? Or does it just magically happen? What if you don't do these middle areas? You come up with an idea and you go straight to polish. What are you missing out on if you do that? So this requires a lot of communication. It also requires a lot of relationship building. And it really requires, if you want to collaborate at this level, to this level of discipline, it requires a lot of business acumen, because it all starts with why we're doing what we're doing in the first place, the why and the what. And most people don't have a way to talk about that in sales enablement. In commercial enablement, leaders that are successful spend most of their time defining those and getting buy-in from executives. So let's talk about how this might roll out. in a business, in your environment? And before I do that, let me ask you a question. Why am I spending so much time on collaboration? Why do you think I'm diving into this so much? Why did I even build all this? Is it just because? Why collaboration? A lot of these tools here around collaboration have helped me think through what I'm doing and why I experience some friction internally sometimes around trying to drive collective results. And it was really interesting to discover that people have different biases around how they show up. And also it's really interesting to discover that people view collaboration as a one-off task. The reason why I spend so much time on collaboration is this idea that orchestration is a cross-functional capability. Orchestration, bringing people together from across functions, isn't just about sending an email to somebody, as you know. It's also way more than just two people like me. It's about this idea of creating something together, of building something new, of tackling challenges. And in today's business world and business environment, there's just not a lot of time for that. So what do? We have to be very disciplined, and we have to make it easier. We have to do the thinking for people so that they are able to plug into the process and use their strengths and talents in the best way possible. So it's about designing the environment of collaboration as an orchestrator. And let me tell you why it's important from a orchestrator lens. Let's take a marketing organization. And a marketing organization is typically organized into a bunch of silos. You have experts in field and brand and product marketing, analytics. Everybody's got a lot of technical expertise that they've developed over years and years and years. And it's very fragmented and siloed when you look at it across all marketing. In this example, let me share you a story to you. I once talked to a marketing person and I said, "Oh, are you in brand?" They said, "No." "Oh, are you in product?" "No." "Are you in field?" "No." I must have asked them 8 or 9 questions about the type of role they had, and they were none of those things. And then they explained what they did, and I didn't even get it. So there's a lot of technical expertise in marketing that's been hyper specialized, and people are very, very, very specialized in one aspect. And to manage that expertise, the company has built out departments and silos. Well, it's easy to point fingers at marketing, but what about sales? We've done the same thing. BDRs, SDRs, XDRs, AEs, strategic accounts, sales engineers. We're going to put customer service over there too sometimes. We're going to have enablement there. There are a lot of different specialists that are specialized in their silo. So what do? We create this need for coordination. But what is coordination? Coordination means sharing information, communicating around dates to get things done. It's about coordinating projects, coordinating tasks, using the calendar as a forcing function. So when people need to network cross-functionally to drive execution, they tend to think of it as, I'm not just networking by my, in my team. The big, huge networking that I will do is within marketing, or I will network in sales, or I'll network around people that I need things from to get things done. Then there's the first team, which is the direct reports, direct reporting line. I gave an example of that earlier, where a manager has direct reports. Those direct reports are going to work on what the manager prioritizes. So that first team is critical. And then there's the individual level. And if we're individuals working, we end up with a lot of tasks to do, and it's difficult to see our value, and we're going to get very, very busy because all of this is broken down. It's a industrial revolution view. This org chart view came from the industrial age assembly line view, where work was broken down into finite tasks and people were staffed into those finite tasks so they could do them better and they could do them faster. And it was very much an operational economies of scale push. So that coordination drives a lot of activity, and that activity is very vertical, and it's about doing what we need to do in our silo. And this vertical up and down is the primary driver. The challenge with that is your company is organized by silos, yet your customers that you're selling to don't care. They don't care how you're organized. All this activity is hard to drive impact. And when we talk about these different views of working together, there's a different altitude level here. At the ecosystem view, that's typically executives. At the individual contributor level, it's people that are involved in processes and tasks. And when you think about the first team, that's about specific levels of performance. And then the network team is about, conflict resolution or prioritization or building out specific initiatives that bring people together. And this network view is oftentimes misunderstood, or it's just not seen. In future classes, I'll talk about the importance of the OKR process to bring this together. However, a lot of SaaS companies today don't have a goal setting or OKR process. So it's very hard to align this. And that's why it's important to talk about collaboration. How do we know what we're doing? How do we know we're doing the right thing? At the ecosystem view, the focus is on creating shareholder value, and executives are driving the balance sheet and share price. At the network team level, it's about creating the right type of engine to bring things to market. And it's about profitability, but who's leading that? And then at the first team level, it's about achieving results, but how do those results align to the strategy? And then for individuals that are driving individual productivity and trying to improve their ability to execute and perform and develop their professional reputation, how does that align to the business strategy? So coordinating across this becomes difficult. Collaborating across this becomes even more difficult because of these different perspectives, different lenses at each altitude level, and the fact that there's so many dots to connect. So how would this adjust? What do we do about this? We can only handle so many relationships. And as an orchestrator, we're going to be involved in a lot of different initiatives. We may start initiatives and we may have hundreds of people that we're building our network team with. So how do we think about this? Well, the way that I view it is we've got to reframe our thinking. What if we focus on what we're building and why we're building it? For example, a product launch. And we think about what's required to drive that product launch. And we don't think about the org chart and who reports into who. We think about what type of skills, capabilities, resources, and processes and information do we need? And how do we bring that together to achieve a successful product launch? We might need some people from marketing and sales and technology and product. So how do we bring them together? Or let's elevate the new hire experience. Let's build a new hire program that helps salespeople be successful. And when we build that new hire program, am I going to build it in my silo, or am I going to build it cross-functionally? How do I build it cross-functionally and orchestrate that cross-functionally so that everybody gets a win from new hire? How do we orchestrate it so that everybody gets a win from product launch that needs to get a win from the product launch? That means we're going to have to figure a lot of things out. And it's not just about coordination, it's about collaboration. Everybody's going to have their different perspective. Everybody's going to have a piece of the pie. They're going to have their own focus. How do we align it to drive impact? And how do we work cross-functionally? This is the capability of orchestrating. And this is why it's important to think about your role as an orchestrator and why you need to develop an approach and a process for collaborating. Because as you work across the network team to roll out sales processes or new hire training, you'll run into managers who don't necessarily view things the way you do. And you'll have to develop relationships with them to help free up their resources to get access to the resources that you need. And then those individuals that report to those managers are going to have to work with you. And what's in it for them to do that when their reporting line doesn't necessarily support that? How do you bring that together? How do you have those candid conversations about the time they're putting in on your initiatives versus their core work? How does that conversation happen? What do you do to enroll people in that? How do you make it worth their while? That's why collaboration is important. It's a alternative to the org chart. It's the way to build a fabric that weaves across the organization and fills the cracks that exist between silos. So to do that, there are two ways and two lenses, if you will, that are going to come together. What I found is as I was collaborating internally, it was very difficult to get people to see and solve together. So I built this little formula to help, and let's see if it helps you. Collaboration is about helping people see and solve, right? So if we say see and solve, what's involved in seeing? Well, seeing is about observing and understanding. So let me ask you this: what are you observing, and what are you working to understand? How would you answer that? How would others answer what they're observing and what they're seeking to understand? From whose perspective? This is interesting because if you're an orchestrator in the commercial enablement area, hopefully you're observing sales conversations and you're understanding what's happening in sales. But it's very hard to do that. It's way easier to figure out what we're observing in our own function and what we're understanding that's happening to us. And this is the lens of what I call inside out versus outside in. An inside out lens would say it's about me, what I observe, what I understand in my job. Outside in would be, what am I observing with customer conversations? What am I understanding about sales? And how much empathy do I have? I'm going to see completely different things based on that perspective. And then when it comes to solving, who's involved, what role do they have, and what's their technique? What's their approach? This is interesting. Most people don't have an approach to co-creating. Most people don't have a technique involved in or evolved enough to explain. They don't explain and share how they actually build things. They just go off and build it and come back. So how do you tap into that when it comes to solving? Who is involved in solving the challenge, and what techniques do they bring to tackle that challenge? Because that's going to drive impact. The more you see the right things and solve the right challenge, the more impact you'll have. So outside in, are you observing outside in, understanding outside in? Do the roles add value outside in perspective? And the techniques that people have, is it to impact customer conversations, or is it to get through their day? And this is the challenge of orchestrating. Successful orchestrating is focused on synthesizing and co-creating, to clarifying what's valuable, and to help people contribute based on their strengths, based on their talents, their perspective, but contribute to the greater good, contribute to the larger impact. By leveraging strengths with the right technique, the more problems you'll be able to tackle. That means then people will feel like they're contributing. The more you observe and publish what you're observing, and the more you define and clarify what's happening and what your understanding is, the more people will weigh in. And that's where value comes from. The value is in the human ability. Your human brain is what's valuable. Create something new, synthesize, connect dots. drive impact. That equation, seeing plus solving, driving impact, is the way in which I view a lot of collaboration. If I'm going to bring people together, do they all see the same thing? If I'm going to bring people together, do they agree that we're solving the right thing? What techniques am I developing to make that happen? So to help with this, pull out your workbook, pull out your participant guide. Let's work on collaboration. Again, this icon in the top right, there's a form and there's some things that you can fill out. I've spent a lot of time on collaboration. What I'd like to do is set up here that collaboration can be intentional and it can be structured. So what if you were to run sessions and meetings in a collaboration environment that fostered seeing and solving together? How would you create the environment as a leader to facilitate collaboration? How would you set that environment up? And let's view it as a series of meetings and set those meetings apart from other routine business as usual meetings and create a environment that's different than the meetings that people are used to. So the define piece here, you'll see in the top left, define, that's the business opportunity, the problem, the course of action, defining the path in a way that creates some shared understanding. So in the tool, that in the workbook, you'll see an example of that. And then in the middle, this idea of develop. How are all these components going to come together? What are we trying to explore? How are we going to use technology? What's the expectation of people participating in this session to collaborate? What type of roles, what type of skills, what type of cross-functional representation do I need to have to factor in a lot of different perspectives? And then on the deploy side, where we're going to actually try to do this, how do we set up the meeting? How do we set the agenda, define when it is, and define what success looks like? So in your workbook, complete each section of the 3D collaboration framework and get ready to actually have and run a collaboration session where you can try some of these things. So take a minute, pause the video and grab that from your workbook. All right, did you fill it out? I updated the slide. It's actually define, create, and try. So sorry about that, but that's what was in the workbook. So I just updated this slide. All right, so your task now is to take what you've learned here and apply it by calling a session and collaborate on an initiative with peers and to drive impact together. Okay, so that's what you want to do. All right, in this module, we talked a lot about collaboration and how you as an orchestrator can activate change. Collaboration is about helping people see and solve problems and challenges with others and co-create. When you do that, you're going to be operating at different altitude levels, up, down, and across the organization. You'll have to bring together people that have an ecosystem perspective, a network perspective, first team, and individual perspective. Bringing together people across the organization at different altitude levels means you're going to have to create a team of people that tackle these issues and that have different perspectives, that are leaning into their strengths and driving impact. You can use the framework for collaboration to help you. You can use that framework to co-create something with others by architecting and designing the session and setting a session apart from the routine work. You can set up an environment where collaboration can happen. You can also use the different types of perspectives that people have and when they show up to collaborate. And you can think about the different layers of collaboration and figure out how to walk people through the idea phase, focusing on why you're doing what you need to be doing, the what phase, when, who, etc., you can walk people through that in that collaboration session. All right, I hope you enjoyed this module on collaboration, the critical ingredient to orchestration, and it's a key attribute of being a successful orchestrator. So again, these concepts are only useful if you apply them. So I encourage you to go and apply that on your next initiative, on something that's going to require multiple perspectives. I'll see you in the next lesson.